No, I'm not an engineer. I'm a sociologist. I have been blessed with having this extraordinary class at Santa Clara University, where I teach students from all over the world, men and women, about gender differences, what I call gender competence and unmasking the gender effect. Women being fully expressed in the workplace, for me, is an integral part of being well and being whole. Calling out the brilliance of women, both for my students and for women at large, men and women, to me is the access to just a higher level of self-expression for women. Actually, men begin to understand where they're coming from, some self-awareness that they've never had. And ultimately, women having a greater impact, a greater contribution, not only in the workplace, but in all sectors of the world. Leslie had said that, it's very familiar to us that women are going to transform the world. I'm really eager to expedite the process. And I think by actually calling out the brilliance, by deciphering and naming in language the unique contributions that women make, naming in language in such a way that men can understand our contribution in their world of skills and objects and tools. It makes a tremendous difference. And as much as we love to collaborate amongst ourselves, to me the real win is when we can also collaborate with these differences. I think earlier we were talking about the union or the balance. A lot of people talk about the balance of masculine and feminine. I talk about the synergy, that there's a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And I'm going to give you some examples in a few minutes where this all came from for me, and about my original research also at one of the largest tech companies in Silicon Valley. The president of a division of Sun Microsystems wanted to know what is the contribution women make that could be the strategic advantage in the global marketplace. Pretty cool, huh? He was really brave, actually. He said he had an intuition that women could be the strategic advantage in the global marketplace. This was in the early 90s when we were in competition with Japan particularly. In any case, what I want to give you, though, in listening to what I have to say is I want to warn you that it's not like I have something entirely new to say. Many of you know your strengths. I'm asking how many of you are articulating those strengths in a way that men can get that. And I'll give you some examples. Not right now. I'm going to give you some stories. For many of you, though, what I consider to be unarticulated, invisible, and unrewarded lies in what we think is common sense. I've had very high-level women, and I'll give you an example, a story of that. Say it's just common sense that I bring. And it's that we need to mine the gold from what our common sense is. An access to that is to articulating also the lens through which we see the world. We're all talking about how we collaborate, we love to connect, but what does that also, how can we translate that into competencies? When George Bush said that we didn't connect the dots around 9/11, I was flabbergasted because that was the most honest thing that could be said. Because there were no women in government. Then I found out there was a woman that worked for the FBI who had, one of her employees had identified a pilot who had only wanted to fly the plane, didn't want to land. And she knew that could mean he could be a terrorist and connected to a terrorist plot. And she told Washington, and they didn't listen. So connecting the dots. See, relationship and connection is not just about between people. It's also between ideas and events, between what happened years ago and what's happening now. And it can be a mindset that is valuable. And it wasn't just 9/11, it was also the Bernie Madoff. A woman connected the dots about him, and WorldCom, some of our greatest financial tragedies, that there have been women, of course, then they're called whistleblowers. But it's the connecting the dots that I also call systems thinking, that is more than just we like to connect. It's very powerful and what can be considered a relational competency. I use the word relational because it obviously has a connotation of relationship. But also for the guys, it connects to relational database. Oh, where everything is interconnected and goes off in all the directions, but there's a rationale for it. It also has to do with describing culture. It's like a cultural concept, whereas the guys are more individualistic, and the United States is a more individualistic culture. So by using this terminology, we can actually speak about our differences in a way that makes sense, and they can get a handle on the differences and start to be able to use them. Now, coincidentally, it's like a coming home for me to be here today, because coincidentally, it was years ago, fresh out of college, just with some retail experience working through college, that I was given the opportunity to be a manager of a store on Union Square in San Francisco, a health food store. I was going to manage this store. The result of my managing the store and my interactions with my boss, we thought very differently. He was one of the madmen from Madison Avenue at the time. We actually were a flagship in bringing what was then the health food industry out of the back streets and the hippie culture of America and into the mainstream and into fashion. And it was that creative synergy between the two of us. And sometimes it was very painful, and I want to extract the pain. That was so innovative and so creative that drove me forward to want to investigate what is it that women bring. An example from that time, first of all, was just the first opening ad. It wasn't the grand opening, it was a soft opening, but here's this marketing genius, and he turns to me and asks me my opinion of the first ad for the store. And I said, it looks to me like it came out of the back of a comic book. And I said, this store is about building health. It's not about curing diseases. And fortunately, he listened to me. When we had the grand opening ad, it was a spectacular sunburst that crowned the full page ad. And I've carried it in my heart. It really is important to me that I've seen that was the first actually drawing and use graphically of a sunburst in advertising and graphically that was carried out in many different places, including for many years on California license plates, symbolizing California and the rising sun of California. So, I had this gratification. We also opened a restaurant with all organic foods, all produce from an organic distributor. And the restaurants in San Francisco couldn't understand why we had such great produce, ripe, delicious tomatoes in the middle of winter. So we introduced them to organic foods. We were the first restaurant to be reviewed in Vogue magazine. And all of that came out of this creative synergy of our differences. For instance, operationally, I just want to give you the example of the difference. I think you can see in the difference of the way we looked at the business. His was problem solving, like this is about curing disease. And mine was, this is about building something great and new possibilities. Well, another difference was in terms of the customers and how we created our relationship with the customer. What I call in business terms customer focus. I was passionate about getting everything that I wanted for the customers. Excuse me, everything that the customers wanted was what I wanted. And I wanted to fill the shelves with all their requests. And we already had filled shelves, and my boss said, we can't do that. We have to watch our cash flow. They'll just have to buy what we select as the best for them. It's like, I know what's best for the customer. That's the paradigm. For me, it's I get into the shoes of the customer and look from there. So what did I do? I decided that I would create a just-in-time ordering system. This is before computers. Instead of ordering once every week or so, I ordered 3 times a week. We were able to reduce the number of the depth of the items on the shelf and increase the number of items they could choose from. And I had to, as a result, though, I had to pull my cashiers off the cash register to help me order. We were ordering constantly, which gave them a sense of responsibility and contact and understanding of the products, which only increased the quality of the workplace and the relationships with the customers. And we became like the heart of the community of Union Square. And of course, the customers were thrilled that we got what they wanted. So, you know, it was a nurturing of the marketplace. I wouldn't use that word nurturing in a male audience, but you know, you and I can understand that. So this is what, you know, for me really created this tremendous response and ambience and love of what was then called the health food movement as it transformed into natural foods. And it was that passion that I had for what I was contributing that fascinated me. One of my customers came to me one day and said, you know, I've been a customer here for a long time, but I just can't figure it out, why this store is so well run without a hint of authoritarianism. Now, I knew where the authoritarian was, but he was the one that taught me that a store takes on the characteristics of either the owner or the strong manager, and I was the strong manager. So it was when that customer said that I thanked him. And as he went out the door, I thought, I wonder if it has anything to do with my being a woman. And that set me forth on this path to decipher and to create language that speaks woman. That's the way I first formulated it. And it was many years later that I had the opportunity to do this research at Sun Microsystems. I had been reading management gurus. I'd been working on trying to bring the customer voice into large corporations. And finally, I was reading this book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge in the early 90s. And he was talking about how we have to have a systems way of thinking in our businesses rather than a linear problem-solving way of thinking. And he even used an example of a liquor store. And here I had the health food store as an example, completely mapped on. And I closed the book and I said, someone has got to start talking about this is the way women think. And I guess it's going to have to be me. And that took me, you know, a few extra steps to Sun Microsystems. And I want to give you that interview that really opened everything up for me was with Carol Bartz when she was then second in command as the president of worldwide sales at Sun. I asked Carol Bartz, what is it that you bring to the management team, the executive team, that wouldn't be there as a woman that you bring? And she said, first of all, she didn't consider it to be her gender. And I wish I had pursued that because I think that has to do with the common sense thing. But she said, what I bring is the ability to see all the different ramifications of a given issue. The guys, they mostly take a high priority problem, take a high priority solution, put the solution against the problem, and then fight fires that happen afterwards. I want to prevent fires. See? And to me, that was exactly an example of that systems thinking, complex problem solving. How many of you brought to the table that you're a complex problem solver? How many of you talk about it that way? Good. That's the connecting the dots complex problem solving, preventing fires. See, the firefighters usually get rewarded. In fact, I've had a number of women tell me that men have told them, if you want to get ahead, you have to light a few fires and put them out. Ooh, yeah, we don't want to do that. We want to run a smooth ship. I want to run a smooth ship. Well, how do you get recognized for that? So you have to articulate it. You have to say, I'm a fire preventer, and it looks different than a firefighter. And you can't take that as just doing your job. You have to make it visible. I had one woman who created not a just-in-time, it was called a hotcakes project for when a product became so popular that it was like selling like hotcakes. Once she'd created it, she hadn't even told her vice president she'd done it. She just knew that she had to do it. When it started happening, the vice president started barking orders. It took her a week and a half to turn things around because, she had just assumed that that was her job, and no one knew about it. I mean, the higher-ups, and they were, trying to fight fires. So that's the kind of example of what we take for granted about our common sense or just doing our job. Getting back to Carol Bartz, though, what she added was that for this she was considered to be not a team player. Can you believe that? Now that's why I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned and I love it, because once men understand, they get it. But the rationale is, from sports analogies, not a team player, because she's not following the call of the quarterback, who would be the CEO, or the coach, who would be the CEO. She's getting into other people's turfs because she's going into HR and finance and R&D and sales. Well, she's sales, but she's getting into all these different turfs. So she's not just playing her area of responsibility. And the third thing is that she's stalling the action. You want to get right into it, but when you have a complex solution, it takes a little bit more taking care of, a little bit more, see, I'm stumbling on that because taking care of, I wouldn't use that word around men. So this is what I was concerned about. Not only are these talents and competencies invisible and unarticulated, that they're actually misinterpreted and devalued and seen as being incompetent. So that's where a whole constellation of new terminology I've developed, and taking it from business culture, et cetera. One thing, I just have a very short time, but I wanted to get two things in. I was at a panel of people talking about women being on boards, getting women on boards at Stanford, and one woman particularly was asked, what is it that she brings to the board? She was on 4 boards, and she said, I bring common sense. There it was. That's what I mean, highly accomplished woman. I took her aside afterwards and gave her the Carol Bartz story. I said, is that what you mean by common sense? And she said, yes, that's what I mean. And I said, and before I opened my mouth, and she said, yes, I will use that terminology. She'd also been asked if she would advocate for more women on boards. And she had said no, because she has to advocate for people that have talents and experience, et cetera. She couldn't advocate for women. When I said, could you advocate for more systems thinkers on boards? She said yes. Now, I want to skip right to a very important competency. How many of you are familiar with devil's advocate? How often your idea is probably responded to with questions, poking holes, doubting. Well, often for men, it's their science and their way of bulletproofing an idea, but they have no idea what it does to a more relational person. I've had women say that they've seen their whole careers flash before their eyes when they realize the devil's advocate is just men's way of trying to bulletproof an idea and not a message saying it's a bad idea. But what we've done through my workshops is identify angel's advocate. Now, you could use the word collaboration, but for some reason, collaboration really isn't understood. You can articulate what it means. You don't need to use it. If you're uncomfortable with the religious connotation of angel's advocate, you don't need to use it. But I love it because angels have traditionally been messengers from God and bring epiphanies. And what I like to articulate about how women collaborate is that they don't just go back and forth. We create ideas together. Different information comes together and creates new information. Of course, that's the same way it can be when we collaborate with men in a much larger arena. I'll take that back. We can have the large arena. But my point is here, it's another competency that we need to be able to articulate, and we can teach men. They actually learn. One of the highest executives at NASA had told me that devil's advocate was science, and they do science there. And when I had them do an exercise with angel's advocate, he realized why they were not getting any new ideas bubbling up from the lower levels of the organization. He realized the devil's advocate had put a muffler on everyone because they didn't want to stand up in front of a firing squad. So these guys can learn it. So I encourage you to look at yourself and look at where you've been assuming your common sense. Is this something that everyone understands, and where you can articulate your competencies, whether it's common sense or something that you consider to be your strength, in a way that can be conveyed into that culture of skills, tools, objects, and goals. And be able to have your voice more heard, more impactful, and also yourself more rewarding. That's what's going to transform the culture of humanity and the future of the planet. I know we're going to do it anyway. I just want to speed it up. So I'm going to encourage you, in the reception, to go out and talk amongst yourselves, and I'll be there too, about what is the competency that you have been considering to be common sense. And Godspeed to all of you. Go out and transform the world.